In the Eagles-Commanders Week 16 matchup, Jayden Daniels threw for 258 yards and 5 touchdowns, and also scrambled for 48 yards. The Commanders ultimately put up 35 points, so what are some of the things that the Eagles can do in this matchup to slow down the Commanders' offense? First, let's start with keeping Daniels contained in the pocket. How do you keep Daniels contained? First and foremost, it starts with rushing as a unit and maintaining rush lane integrity. What do I mean by this? When rushing in typical 4-man pass rushes, you want to think of it like keeping the quarterback in a box, with the contained rushers working to maintain the top corners of the box and the interior pass rushers working to maintain the bottom corners of the box. But the front needs to be fluid. Sometimes a defender will get pushed too far to one side, and it's important for the other rushers to recognize this and make the rush right. Simple enough concept, but let's dive a little bit deeper. Jayden Daniels leads the NFL in total scrambles by a pretty large margin, but looking at the specifics, he leads the NFL in total number and percentage of scrambles outside of the pocket to the right. Knowing Jayden prefers to scramble to his right, it's going to be crucial that whoever is the contained rusher on that side, and remember, that will change from Nolan Smith to Jalix Hunt to Josh Sweat and even Jalen Carter at times. But whoever is the contained rusher on that side will need to make sure that they don't rush high and pass the quarterback and give an escape lane to Daniels, and they got to keep in mind that they cannot dive way inside trying to chase a sack. Here we see the Saints' Carl Granderson rush to the depth of the quarterback and then work back underneath to collect a sack when Jayden looks to scramble. We see Nolan Smith do the exact same thing when he picked up a sack against Jordan Love in the wild card round. It's going to be important when rushing on that side of the line to prioritize power rushes to collapse a pocket and use counters off of those setups. Speed rushes like cross chops and ghost techniques makes it too easy to run a defender up the pocket. Now, just because Daniels has the highest rate of scrambling outside and to the right, that doesn't mean he won't scramble up the middle. In fact, he's still tied for the most scrambles up the middle, just due to the sheer number of times that he scrambles. In their Week 16 matchup, the Eagles had a couple lapses with interior contain. We see the Eagles in their wide front with 2-3 techniques lined up outside of the guards and also 2 wide 9 techniques. This is a front used primarily in obvious passing downs designed to get one-on-one opportunities, but it also makes it easier to push the defensive tackles out wide and open up space for the quarterback to escape. We even saw the Commanders check into a quarterback trap play on 3rd and 7 when they saw the Eagles come out in their wide front. We saw the Eagles give up a scramble up the middle and this front against the Rams as well. If I'm the Eagles, I'm having a specific game plan if I want to use these fronts in this game against this quarterback. When in these fronts, I'm going to use read stunts between the 2 defensive tackles. We discussed this in the defensive review of the Rams game, but both defensive tackles will take a step towards the center and read who he is blocking. If the center blocks towards the defensive tackle, then that defensive tackle is going to loop around while the other defensive tackle sets a pick. By running this stunt, the defensive tackles condense the interior of the pocket while also presenting an open gap to the quarterback before closing it. We see exactly that on this interior stunt from the New Orleans Saints. In addition to that, I would also use the fake stunt technique that Jalen Carter used to sack Matthew Stafford last week. By using the fake stunt, it condensed Carter back inside and takes away the huge interior rush lane for the quarterback. But let's look at some other strategies that Fangio can use to keep Daniels contained. Like previously mentioned, Daniels loves scrambling to the right, so use that tendency against him by presenting a soft edge and then looping someone back around. Use ET stunts where the edge penetrates first and the defensive tackle loops back outside. The edge crashing inside gives the appearance that there is a lot of space to run outside before having a defender waiting for him in the wings. Here we see a creative stunt from the Falcons. The Falcons blitz their linebacker and also have their edge defender slant inside and have the opposite edge defender loop all the way back around to occupy the edge. Now, I would stay away from tech stunts, where the defensive tackle is penetrating upfield first and then working to contain with the edge rusher looping inside. The reason being is that it's too easy for the defensive tackle to get pinned inside the tackle and open up the outside rush lane. Now, focusing on other areas of the game, I would definitely blitz Daniels less often in this matchup. He killed the Eagles when they blitzed in Week 16. Next Gen Stats had the Eagles blitzing Daniels 15 times on passes that resulted in 11.5 yards per attempt and 3 touchdowns. Overall for the year, Daniels has fared better when blitzed than when not blitzed. He has a higher completion percentage when not blitzed, but he holds onto the ball longer, has a lower average yards per attempt, has a worse touchdown to interception ratio, and lower passer rating. I would rather see us use some pressures instead. But let's look at some other tendencies of the Commanders' offense. The Commanders' go-to receiver overall overall is Terry McLaurin, and that remains the case on third down. Terry McLaurin has the 7th highest average depth of target on third down of all wide receivers with a minimum of 20 third down targets. When we narrow that down to third and long, so 3rd and 7+, he's second in average depth of target at 21.1 yards. On third and long situations, I would expect the Eagles' primary play calls to be variations of split field coverages, where they play cover 2 to Terry's side if he's the number 1 receiver lined up out wide, and quarters if he's in the slot or in a bunch or stack alignment, and force the ball to go underneath to someone else. But here's the thing, the Commanders are very much willing to go for it on 4th down in competitive games. They went for it on 4th down 3 times in the Week 16 matchup, 5 times in the wildcard matchup against the Bucs, and 4 times against the Lions. When the Commanders get past midfield, if it's 4th and 5 or less, they're going for it. So how does that affect the third down play calling? When the Eagles run their split field coverages, they want to take away the deep passes and force you to throw underneath. But knowing that the Commanders will go for it on 4th down past midfield, I wouldn't be surprised to see more man coverage from the Eagles in those situations to take away the quick passes underneath. But if it's 3rd and long, the Eagles corners need to be cognizant that the Commanders like to go deep to Terry McLaurin. McLaurin's touchdown against Quinion came on 3rd and 8 at the Eagles' 32-yard line while in man coverage. Let's look at some other tendencies. When do the Commanders like to take deep shots? When looking at average depth of throw based on field position, the Commanders step up their aggressiveness in 2 scenarios, between the 40s and when backed up on their own goal line. They have the 6th highest average depth of throw when throwing between the 40s, and the 5th highest average depth of throw when backed up within their own 10-yard line. Let's break it down a step further. The Commanders see a big jump in average depth of throw when throwing out of 12 personnel versus 11 personnel, and that shows up between the 40s. In 11 personnel between the 40s, their average depth of throw of 8.7 yards ranks 16th, but in 12 personnel between the 40s, their average depth of throw of 14.0 yards ranks 3rd. The Commanders love using this ace formation, where you have a balanced 2x2 formation with the tight end and wide receiver on both sides, and taking deep shots to Terry McLaurin. His average depth of target in 12 personnel is 4th in the NFL among wide receivers with a minimum of 10 targets. When the Commanders come out in this formation but aligned in a condensed set, they're likely to use McLaurin on crossing routes and dig routes, and when he's aligned out wide, it's more likely to be go routes down the sideline. Now, conventional thinking would be to play quarters when in the condensed sets, especially with the offset tight ends, as the offset tight ends are highly likely to chip and release underneath, which would free up the safeties to help bracket the crossing routes, or to play cover 2 to McLaurin's side when aligned out wide. But the Commanders have a run rate of 53% in 12 personnel overall and 58% on 1st down. They want to use a threat of the run on 1st down in 12 personnel to influence defenses into single high coverage, where they can then use play action to get favorable matchups to attack down the field. In order to alleviate some of that pressure against the run and still play quarters on the back end, I wouldn't be surprised to see the Eagles get into their 6-1 front against 12 personnel and play quarters on the back end. The Commanders like to go deep when backed up to try to flip the field and get out of the shadow of their own goal line, knowing how low the odds are that a team dinks and dunks its way to a 90-yard touchdown drive. No matter the coverage they choose to run in this situation, the defense needs to be aware that the Commanders will run concepts to attack down the field and play top down to force underneath throws. But here's the thing, when you play one team 3 times in a season, when you get 3 weeks where you just get to focus on that team, you get to know what they do. You start to pick up on tendencies and formational tells. For instance, when in 12 personnel and the back is in pistol, the Commanders' pass rate is 32%. When in 12 personnel and shotgun, the Commanders' pass rate is 67%. When they're in their 3x1 sets with the nub tight end on the backside, what is the alignment of the number 3 receiver? If he's off the line of scrimmage or they motion to 3x1, they love running bubble RPOs. If the number 3 receiver is aligned on the line of scrimmage, it's not going to be a bubble RPO. But what about the location of the back? When he's aligned in gun near, which means he's on the same side as the tight end, they prefer zone runs. When aligned in the same formation and gun far, they still use zone runs, but you see more gap scheme runs sprinkled in. When they're in 11 personnel and they're 2x2 formation and gun near, they have specific plays they like to run based on the splits of the wide receiver and tight end. If the wide receiver has a tight split, they like running their hitch flat RPO. If the wide receiver is split wide, they like running zone read with the tight end leading up to the second level. But again, the location of the running back in any of these formations gives a tell as well. If he's aligned between the guard guard and tackle, you have to be alert for run. But if he's aligned over the tackle, he's likely trying to get to the flat quickly, and you're more likely to see a quick pass concept, as opposed to an RPO. And factor in down and distance, knowing they're much more likely to run RPOs on first down and second and medium to short situations. What about how they use Jaden Daniels? We talked about how he likes to scramble outside and to the right at a high rate, but the Commanders also scheme that up to a degree. Daniels has had 34 designed rollouts to the right compared to 3 to the left, but diving further, 25 of those 34 rollouts to the right have come out of 12 or 13 personnel. When the defense sees 12 personnel and a tight end aligned in the slot, tight to the line of scrimmage, particularly John Bates as opposed to Zach Ertz, they like to use that tight end to pin the edge rusher inside to get Daniels out of the pocket. And what about Jaden Daniels' designed runs? We see a big increase in his designed runs the closer the offense gets to the goal line, and that's particularly notable considering it doesn't take a genius to figure out that the majority of plays happen outside of the red zone. This season, only 19% of the Commanders' plays happen in the red zone. Jaden Daniels had success in Week 16, no doubt, but it wasn't the worst game in the world for the Eagles defense. One big play came on a fluke touchdown where they had rotated down to their fourth corner and there was confusion about who was supposed to be on the field and off the field. Of the games that Jaden Daniels finished this season, the Week 16 game was his 4th lowest of the year in regards to yards per attempt, with Week 11 being his 2nd lowest. He tied a season high with 2 interceptions, and the Eagles have had a third of his interceptions this year. Like I said, playing a good team for the 3rd time in one season is difficult because at this point in time, you know exactly what they do and they know exactly what you do. So it comes down to who has the better players and who's going to execute better in a 1-game sample size. So I guess my question is, who do you think has the better players?